something about the structure of this building and how that came about, because it was a difficult time for the church to purchase the land and then all the funding and so on. So this is a great history, and he has a lot of details in mind, and let's hope that he will be able to work through that with Rafi's urging. And all right, so I want to pray, and then through this all, we want to see how God was faithful to this church and to the people who served him so well. Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this, your faithfulness. That's what we want to praise you for, Lord. That you have been faithful, and when your children are faithful, you reward them. And so I pray that as Dr. Adrouny shares, may we retain the important things of as we get to know you through it and to see how you work and how we can be faithful also. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, okay, the time is yours. We're going to stop at 2 o'clock.
Okay, all right. Now,
Let's listen.
About mental block.
What's that?
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming. I feel some of the information that you're going to hear is very critical. You know, a few days ago, I was thinking most of the critical people who were in the building committee are no longer here. Among them was Leah Garabedian, Ed Median, George Ishkhanian, Paul Kolikian. They were very active, and we had to work to that. Also, one other thing, I'm sure some of you will have some questions, but I would appreciate if you can keep it toward the end, because I have a lot to talk. As you know, I'm legally blind. I am age-related macular degeneration. I see all of you, but I can't recognize you, and I can't read. So everything I have to do from my mind, and I hope that I can remember some of the things in proper consequence. Okay. So let's begin by saying that some people will question, why did a young physician who was very busy with the active practice of internal medicine and cardiology, who was on call day and night, 7 days a week, who had no associate, who had a clinic at the French hospital to which he had to attend every week. He had another clinic at UCSF Medical School where he was on the clinical faculty. Why did such a busy physician decide to build a church? Well, you will find the answer in the next few minutes when I tell you what exactly happened and what prompted me to do that. I began my practice in July 1962. And one of my earliest patients was the late Henry Getmanian. Henry was a drug dealer. He was a big philanthropist who, with other two philanthropists, established High Desert College. He had a son, Paul, who I think is still alive, was a young evangelical pastor, very popular. He was a big speaker. He was the pastor of the church on the not congregation, the other church, not congregation, the
First Presbyterian.
of the church on Sloat Boulevard. So, why did I got another interpreter here? Okay. Why did
Paul Getmanian.
Huh?
You were talking about Paul Getmanian.
Paul Getmanian. Paul was the pastor of this church on Sloat Boulevard. So I came to know Paul to his father, Harry, and became good friends. In 1964, I met my future partner, my lovely wife, Armenia, and after only 3 days, we had so much in common in our background that we decided to get married. And we had a big wedding at Paul Getmania's church on Sloat Boulevard. After the wedding, Armenia and I became regular members of the church, Paul Getmanian's church, and we went every Sunday for service. At the end of the year, we were blessed with the arrival of a beautiful young baby, a daughter. We called her Jane Ann. She was an exceptionally intelligent little girl. Around when she was 3 years of age, she used to ask questions that only older children would ask. Anyway, well, around that time, which was the beginning, thank you, the beginning of 1969, Paul Getmanian decided to move to Seattle to be the chaplain of the University of Washington. So he was replaced with a young American Assyrian minister at the church. It was the Presbyterian church we were attending. So we continued to attend church as usual, and Jane was going to Sunday school there. 9 months later, we had the tragedy of losing our beautiful daughter. She was not even 4 years old. And there was a big funeral for this not even 4-year-old daughter at the church. Several of my physician friends attended. A number of nurses attended. A number of oldies in the hospital attended. I was very popular at French hospital, so they all tried to come. And we had a big funeral for a 4-year-old daughter. After the funeral, Armenia and I stopped. We noticed something. We had not received a single phone call from the new minister. We had been members of this church for almost 6 years. And you lose your daughter, and you're the new minister. You don't even say something to us. Not a word. And for that matter, we did not get anything or almost anything from the congregation itself. And we were stumped. Well, there had been some pressure on me to join Calvary Church. For one thing, my oldest sister, R.P. Shamlian, married to Torah Shamlian, were active members of the church. I had given a talk on one occasion to the congregation. And 2 years earlier, on the 50th anniversary of the Armenian Missionary Association of America, Reverend Chopurian, who was the secretary of the Armenian Missionary Association, called me to chair a banquet on the 50th anniversary of the Armenian Missionary Association, which we did at the Fairmont Hotel, and we raised $16,000 for the thing. So there was this pressure for us to join, and we are stunned here. We've been members for 6 years, and not a word. So we decided we're going to quit that church or join Calvary. So in October 1969, we started coming to this church. 3 months later, January 1970, it was the election of the church members. Somebody, I don't know who, had placed my name as a candidate to be a moderator for the church. I didn't know it. And when the elections took place, lo and behold, I was elected a moderator of the church. I didn't know. It was amazing. The previous moderator was Stanley Median, Median's oldest brother. He had been a moderator for every year during the past 20 years. For 20 years he's been a moderator, and all of a sudden a stranger comes and takes this position. I became very good friends with Stanley. And soon thereafter, he became my patient. I also took care of his wife, Vivian, who was educated, a very smart woman. I also took care of her. So we were very good friends. And he particularly enjoyed seeing Armenia. Stanley used to come to our home every Wednesday. Armenia would drink coffee or something. He would smile for an hour ago. He just enjoyed coming here. We were very good friends. Okay.
Where was the location of the church?
The church was on 38th Avenue in
Okay.
in San Francisco, near Judah. 38th
Kirkham,
Avenue.
1339 38th
Yeah,
Avenue.
38th
Oh,
Avenue.
wow.
Okay. So, now my friend also has to start. Come back in a second. So,
You were the moderator now?
oh yes, I was a moderator. The first thing that we did with Armenia, all there was of the church at that time, there was a sanctuary. No rules whatsoever in the middle of it, and there was a basement, nothing else. And there was a courtyard. And there was no activity in the church. There was no choir, there was no Sunday school, nothing. All they had was a Sunday service, and once a year, on the anniversary of the church, they would have a dinner in the basement and have a speaker. That's the only, and they usually cook some shish kebab in the yard that they had. There was nothing else.
That's good enough.
So, so the first thing that we did, almost the second in the army, I said, we need a new church. There's nothing here. So we said, well, maybe we'll drive around, find a church, we'll buy it. And I don't know how we were going to buy it. The annual budget of the church at that time was $3,500 to $4,000 a year, which probably took care of only the pastor's salary. There was nothing else. How are you going to buy with that money a new church? That was beyond me, but we thought we'll do it. So we drove around Sunset with Armenia once a day, trying to see if there's a church or something, maybe you can buy it. We couldn't find it. Then we went to Daly City. We drove in Daly City, all the beach, we did a church. Then I said, maybe we can buy a small lot and then build a small church on it. So we even went across the Golden Gate, there was nothing. So we gave that thing. The next thing Armenia did, Armenia started a choir. 25 people showed for the rehearsal the first night to our house. 25 people. That was it. A little later, our son was getting to be, John, was getting to be around 3. He needed to go to Sunday school. There was no Sunday school. What are we going to do? So what we do, Armenia started a Sunday school in the basement of the church. A few families started joining. They bring their small, so the Sunday school started growing. And around that time, Barbara Median, at Median's daughter, had 2 small girls. She brought them to the Sunday school. And along with Barbara, Ed Median started coming to church. Well, Ed Median had been a member of the church for several years, like his brother, but he used to come only once a year on New Year's. Never came otherwise. But now that her grandchildren who were here, they started coming. So I sent him to know Ed, and we became very close friends, and we worked together very nicely the following years. The next thing I did as a moderator, the only activity they had was this annual meeting where they invited somebody to speak. I started getting young Armenian American evangelical speakers. The first person I got was the late Dr. Mihran Ababian. Well, I knew Mihran from Aleppo. We belonged to the same church, the Emmanuel Church, and the pastor was Pastor Siragan Ababian, Mihran's father. I thought Mihran also, as you know, established the American University of Armenia. Anyway, so he was the speaker for 1 year. The next year, I got another speaker, Professor Haserjian from the Hollywood Church in Los Angeles. At that time, there was no United Church. There was a Hollywood Church and the downtown church. They tried to unite it. And then I had the brother-in-law of Governor Adrouny. He was a young American pastor, very humorous. He told a joke that I remember to this day, and it was really funny. He said, one Sunday morning, he was driving in the country, and his wife was, that's Governor Adrouny's sister, was sitting on the front seat of the car. And they saw some donkeys grazing in the land. So he turns around, points to the donkeys, and tells his wife, any relative of yours referring to the donkeys? She said, yes, from your side. You know what I mean? That was, I mean, it was funny. So around this time, there was some activity in the congregation. New families started joining. And among them, there were two from Egypt, which are important to mention. One was George and Alice Bedarian from Alexandria. They knew Armenia from Alexandria because Armenia's father was pastor there. So they came, they started becoming active. Another was George Ishkanian from Cairo, Egypt. And George knew Armenia because Armenia's father had a summer home in Alexandria, and he used to rent that to George Ishkanian's family, so they used to come to Alexandria summer because the heat in Cairo in summer is unbearable. So at least they got a little bit refresh at the beach. So, okay.
So we're looking for a new church now.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll check. So by 1978, people said, okay, maybe we should build a church. They all want a church. Okay, thank you so much. So, 1978, there were, there aren't many empty lots in San Francisco, but on Brotherhood Way, there were several empty lots. There was this 2-acre lot, 2 buildings west of our current thing on Brotherhood Way, which was listed for $160,000, and the Zachariah Crucian School bought that in 1978. There was this lot, which was 1 acre, which our church currently is. The asking price in 1978 was $100,000. We didn't have a thing. And by 1980, the asking price of the lot had become $300,000.
Wow.
For this 1 acre land. Now I forgot to say something. In 1970, when we started talking about getting a new church, my late mother-in-law, Armina's mother, said, why don't you start a savings account for the building fund? I thought it was a good idea. So we started a savings account, and by 1980, there was $46,000 in that savings account. So in 1980, Paul Kilikian had a very good real estate agent. He was able to sell the old church in his as-is state with dry rot and termite for around $255,000. So all of a sudden, we had $255,000
Plus 46.
plus $46,000. We bought this lot for that price, because that was the asking price, close to $300,000. We were then left with $0. So you had a lot, you had no building, no church, no money. Church services were done at the Masonic Lodge, 2 buildings down west from this thing. So that was next thing we did. A number of things happened. I have forgotten the exact sequence. It doesn't matter. The first thing that we did, we formed a building committee. I was elected to be the chairman, and Ed Mazian, the vice chairman, And there were three subgroups. There was the construction committee, the chairman was George Ishkania. There was a funding committee, the chairman was Paul Kalukia, and there was a publicity committee, the chairperson was Leah Garabedra. So the first thing I did was call Reverend Chopurian of the Armenian Missionary Association in America. I knew him because 2 years earlier he had asked me to chair the 50th and the banquet on the 50th anniversary of the organization of the Fairmont Hotel. We raised $16,000. So I told him we have a piece of land, we need some money. Okay, we'll give you $100,000. Thank you very much. More money. Then we went to the American Board of Congregational Churches. In 1946, when they had bought this old church, the congregation had borrowed some money from the American Board of Congregational Churches, and they had paid it back in time, so they had a good record. The headquarters was New York. There was a local representative in San Francisco in the person of an American Japanese citizen by the name of Reverend Katagiri. He was a nice fellow. His office was on Market Street on Powell in the Fairleigh Middle second floor. So Ed Median and I went and met him. I told him, we have this piece of land, we need somebody to build a church. And then I very casually mentioned, I said, we also want to build a social hall for young people to attract. He loved that idea. He put a very good word for us with the headquarters in New York. Around that time, there was a young congregational minister in Berkeley by the name of Reverend Deckenbach. He became the spokesperson for the board in New York. So I became very close friends with him. So if I had any question and so on, I would call him. And then he was a nice fellow. The next thing I did, I invited the whole board of not Congregational Church, yeah, the board of the Congregational Church in New York to us for dinner. All 10 showed up. Armenia put a huge dinner. It was a very successful dinner.
She's used to that.
Yeah, he did an exceptionally good thing. They were all so smart. They said, okay, we'll give you 100,000. Thank you very much. So I have 200,000 to work with. This is just promises. And by the way, the normal rate, as you know, for a loan is about 6%, 7%, maybe 5 to 7%. The interest rate at that time, you know how much it was? 21%. And you have to borrow money. Well, they give you this money, but then still you have to pay interest to the thing. By the time we got the actual money, the interest rate had got down to 13%. So I got a call from the American Board of Churches. They said, we're going to charge 8% for the interest. Oh, thank you very much. 15%. Then I called immediately Chopuria. I said, hey, they're giving this for 8%. How about you doing that? Okay, we'll do you. Because a year later, the interest rates dropped to 8%. I got another call from the American Board. We're going to reduce your interest to 6%. Thank you very much. So I called Chopuria. I tell him, you know, they dropped my interest from 8 to 6. How about you guys? Okay. He sort of reluctantly admitted that he complained to me. He had two other loans. One, the Downey Church in Los Angeles, and another loan to the church in Toronto. He said, well, I had to decrease their loans also. So what? I mean, this was unbelievable. Anyway. It's hard to be so. We had 200,000 at least. The next thing we said, we need to have an inauguration of the land. We got this land, we bought it, we had to do inauguration. So he said, who do we invite for the inauguration? Well, Leah came. He says, how about inviting the mayor of San Francisco? Oh, the mayor would come for a small church like this. Diane Feinstein was the mayor. So I called the mayor office the next day, and the mayor apologized, saying that she couldn't come, but he assigned a city supervisor by the name of John Molinari, whose wife was Armenian. So he was the president of the city. And I suspect strongly the reason Diane didn't come, Diane Feinstein, was because Molinari's wife was Armenian, and he probably thought this would be a more appropriate person to do. So one of the speakers, before I forget, on the inauguration, I needed a loudspeaker. There was no problem, but there's no electricity on the lot. So how are you going to have the loudspeaker work? So I went next door to church, thinking that maybe I can get a long extension cord and get some electricity for this. I saw a 50-year-old guy working in the garden around the thing. I introduced myself, and he turned out to be a retired colonel in the army, a member of the church. I told him, this is what I need. Oh, so no problem. Just get an extension cord and get all the electricity you want. So, coming back, so we invited John Molinari, we invited Reverend Deckenbach, another 5 people. The other one was Reverend Harkin Misilian, and the 4th one was Dr. Pizot Krikoyan, originally from Beirut, who was head of the Christian Medical Center, but he immigrated to Fresno, so he came, and the 5th person was I. It was a huge crowd there. I don't know if Jerry Tujan is here. Is he here? No, he's not here. Jerry Tujan and Seta Tujan had just moved to San Francisco area. They didn't know any church. There was the first time they came, they saw this huge crowd. Later on, he joined the church. Today, Jerry Tujan is the treasurer of the church. Anyway, so we had a very successful inauguration of the night. All 5 of us spoke. After the inauguration, the whole congregation went next door. You just walk maybe half a block or more to go to the Cruz General School, where they had a hall that we used to run. There, Reverend Misilian gave me a check for $10,000. He said this was from a lady of our congregation in Fresno who had recently died and left that in her will to give it to us. This lady, 20 years earlier, was a member, was a San Francisco resident, and he was a member of Calvary. So I suspect that he made her will at that time. I left $10,000. It was a godsend thing. We got the $10,000 thing. So we have 200,000, and every time we met, we had somebody, so we had a bit more. The next thing was we have to do a fundraising event. So, what do we do? There was this hotel, Amphilet Theater, on the peninsula near Burlingame, which later, a few years later, they demolished it because it was not earthquake proof. So we wanted to do a fundraising thing. So the question now, who do you invite for this fundraising to attract? Well, there I came with a solution. He said, do you know, there is this Armenian guy. His name is Ken Hachikian. He is a speechwriter for President Reagan. He is at the White House. I said, do you think he is going to come and accept an invitation from a small congregation like us? Well, that didn't do anything to Leah. Leah called the White House the next day. And Leah thought she is going to go 2 or 3 persons before being connected to Ken Hachikian. And lo and behold, Ken Khachikian came on the phone and accepted our invitation. Anyway, that was a very successful evening. We raised $88,000 during that session. I had a black patient who was a religious type. He liked me very much, particularly since I was trying to build a church. He came to us and donated $1,500, a black gentleman, to our church. Also, at that, Ken Khachikian's mother, who lived in Visalia, she came all the way from Visalia to see, right in the front row, to see her son speak. It was a very successful thing. So we had a little over 200,000, well, actually a little bit more, closer maybe $200,000. So the next thing we had to do was find out an architect. Well, there were three possibilities. There was first George Rossi. George Rossi was born in Italy but had immigrated to the United States at the age of 5. He was a very experienced and seasoned architect. He had built many homes, and then he had been the inspector for federal buildings, and also he had built 2 Catholic churches. I came to know him through a Jewish radiology physician friend for whom George had built a home at the beach. He later on built my house, George Roy. So I knew George. He was fun. Then we needed 2 others. There was a young Armenian architect. His mother sent in $5,000 to us for the fund. I assume maybe she expects us to have her son be the architect of the new church. And then there was a British architect whose resume was like the Armenian. Both the Armenian American and the British had not built any churches, in contrast to George Rossi, who had built 2 Catholic churches. The next thing I said, okay, you appear in front of the committee and make your case. The committee was almost 18 people, so each one came on separate times. They presented their case, and then I said to the committee, I passed some ballots. I said, now you put your choice, 1, 2, 3. We did. I took the ballots, I didn't open. I said, let's take each candidate. What are his pros, what are his cons? We discussed this. And then we did it for 3, and then I put a second series of ballots. Now you put your choice, first 2 or 3. When we opened both ballots, turned out George Rossi was the design architect. It was the wisest decision because George Rossi was really a seasoned gentleman and extremely good architect. He was also a contractor, not only architect. He hired the electrician, the plumber, the carpenter. Most architects don't do that. So I was lucky because I didn't have to worry to find a carpenter or an electrician, but he did. So the next thing was, okay, George, we need a design of the church. So he came out with the design, and as most American churches have a tower, the tower is usually a square shape. So I presented to the congregation, there were 2 objections. The first one from Varis Kirkesian, John Kirkesian's brother. He used to live in Oakland at the time, later on in the Fresno.
This is a sweet story.
You know, he said, I live in Oakland. I get up every morning and I pass by St. Martin Church. I know it is an Armenian church because the cupola, the tower, is 12-sided. I thought he had a valid point. So I took the issue with the architect. The architect said, no problem, I'll make it 12-sided. And so he made 12-sided. The other complaint was from Yevnik Torunian. Yevnik was Joseph Eskilion's sister. He says, you're going to build a church and not have a social hall? Who was thinking of a social hall? We're thinking about a church, and he's worried about it. What type of a church is it going to be without a social hall? Well, he had never considered or thought about the social hall, but at that time, the space now occupied by the Badveli's office, the secretary's office, the library, and the fireside room was empty. It was a big call. I said, let's use this as a temporary social hall, which we did. Well, we need a kitchen. Oh, we need So we had to build a small room, which is still present. That's why you have that small room that, close to the bathrooms. That was a temporary kitchen. At the same time, we built 3 rooms downstairs. One was the temporary office, the other 2 was Sunday school thing. So it started going, and things were going, and of course, every Sunday I would get up, give a progress report, and ask for money. Some money would come. Every Sunday, it was routine. And this was for almost 10 years. So it went on. We finished. I wish I had notes, but I can't. Anyway, it comes to me in a second. So the next thing that So the next thing was that we were raising money. We finally had $550,000. Oh, we can have, maybe we do. So let's say we had the plans. Let's get a bid. Well, we bid. Well, the bid came $930,000. We short $400,000. Oh, what do we do? So the construction committee started. I said, let's eliminate certain things. For example, you see the artistic pattern around the cupola from outside and also from the sanctuary. We had set aside $600 to have that done. We eliminated that. Later on, we had to do it again. We paid $1,800 for something that was originally $600. Like everything, it costs more. So we did. We started cutting this, cutting that. So one Tuesday evening, the construction committee, it was my house. We're cutting this, we're cutting that. We came down to around 750,000. All we had was 550,000. We're still short 200,000. It was almost 2 o'clock. There was nothing else to do. There was Charles Janigian, who is a member of the construction committee. He was the son-in-law of Barbara Edmedian. And he was not a member of our church. He was an apostolic Armenian. His father had been a carpenter. He knew a little bit about carpentry. He also had experience in business. We thought it would be nice if he has it because he will give us some ideas. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the committee is still in my house. And the next day, everybody, I had a clinic. Everybody has to go some business. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Charles Janikian got up and said, gentlemen, we might as well admit it, we can't hack it. Ooh. And the meeting finished. I went home. I wasn't home. I went to bed. I couldn't sleep that night. It was one of the worst nights of my life. I turned to one side. All I hear, you can't hack it. I turned this side. You can't hack it. All night, you can't hack it. Here, we've sacrificed everything. We've come to 550,000, and somebody says you can't do it. It was terrible. I can never forget that night. But we didn't give up the boat the next morning. We continued to do. And finally, we had enough money to start. So we gave the green light to George Rossi to start. So George Rossi came the first day. He was doing all the lot. Right the first day when he's there, guess who showed up? The plumbers union showed up. They want to go on strike. Why? We're not using union labor. The unions are extremely important in San Francisco. They are powerful and they can be very nasty. But there had been something that happened to the union that I think it helped us. Let me tell you what it was. The Golden Gate Bridge is a huge bridge in San Francisco. Park. Golden Gate Park. It's a huge park in San Francisco. It starts from 1 block west of City Hall in downtown San Francisco all the way to the beach in Pacific Ocean. the irrigation system of the Golden Gate Park is handled by the Province Union. They open and close the valves. Well, the union had a beef with City Hall, so they go on strike. So what did they do? Nobody would shut off the valves of the Golden Gate Park for 3 days, day and night. The waters ran at Golden Gate Park. Nobody would close the faucet because the union had it and they're on strike. Well, the city of San Francisco went to court, got an injunction against the union, and the judge put a condition that they cannot strike anybody else for 5 years. Well, that 5-year period had just ended 2 weeks before we started our project. So technically they could do it. You know, they could steal all those things. Anyway, the credit goes to Ed Medja. He was able to negotiate a solution with the Plymouth Union. I mean, sometimes what agreed almost, I would say, it's unbelievable. It was, they agreed to it. So the agreement was that we will build 2 door frames, just a frame of a door with no door panels, just the frame. We would put 1 door frame at one corner of the entrance to the lot, and that would be the union door. And the other one at the other corner of the lot, that would be the union door. So if you're a union worker coming to work on the new church, then you enter the lot through the union door. If you're a non-union worker, then you can enter the lot through the non-union door. Some reason it worked. But I have a funny feeling because it was close. I mean, actually, we were a little concerned that they might torch the church at night because the unions can do all sorts of things. But had they really gone on a strike, we were ready to go to the 2 big newspapers of San Francisco, the Chronicle and the Examiner, and you would see the headline the next morning: Province Union prevents small congregation from building a church. That would have a devastating effect, and I'm sure the people would have supported us. We didn't have to do this. We didn't. So the going after that was easy, and nothing happened with the union. Then people come, they want to be part of the building. So I started selling parts of the new church for a given donation, whatever it is. There were 4 or 5 trees. I even sold the trees. Each tree, I said, this tree is $500. You give it, it'll be in loving memory of your mother, father. So I sold 4 or 5 trees like that. And I sold different parts of things. So we had a lot of money. Things went smoothly until the middle of the summer of 1983. I think it was in August. I don't remember the exact date. I know Leah had it. So we finished the first stage, that's the sanctuary, at the temporary social hall. So the first service took place at 2 o'clock. The church was filled to the brim. People were standing. It was a very eventful thing. And during that service, the son, Robert Rossi, who was an architect also, George Rossi, presented me with a symbolic big key. He says, this is the key that opens the new sanctuary. So Leah kept that someplace, I know, as a record. So we did. Right after that service, the whole congregation met at the Hyatt Regency in downtown San Francisco. 450 people had signed in, and the admission ticket was $35. And I was the main speaker on that. And the other more important event was Ed Medja gave a plaque depicting the picture of the new church, incidentally, which was made by the late Vasquez Kazarian. The plaque was the other thing. We gave it to Robert Rossi, the architect's son, who was running. Robert Rossi was a nice guy, but I think he had a problem with his license. I never asked him. I asked him, but his father was always trying to follow his son, so we gave him the plaque. I think his father and the thing were very happy because I had sent complimentary tickets, $35 each, one to George Rossi and his wife, and to Robert Rossi and his wife. So that was a very successful one. 2 days later, I got a check from George Rossi for $150. He wanted to pay back for the ticket that I had given because he knew we need the money. He was really a nice guy. I was lucky to have him. You know, he was a true gentleman. So the going after that was more or less moot, but we had this loan, 200,000, one for AMA, another one for the American Congregational Church. So every Sunday I would get up a progress report and ask for money, and somebody would come. Finally, by 1990, we were able to retire both loans. And then I took a second loan to build the social hall from the Armenian Missionary Service for $100,000. Then we built the social hall. By then, George Rossi had either retired or died. His son, Robert Rossi, worked with another architect. It worked out fine. They did the social hall and the professional teacher. So we finished it in 1992. We started using the social hall. I think it was maybe the second week we have church at the social hall, and some people came and said, you know what, we're spending gas in the night. Really? So we called the PGA. The guy comes, examines, so everything is all right. The next Sunday, some other people complained. We're spending gas in the night. We call PG&E again. PG&E comes. Another guy examines. The third week, we are spending gas. We call PG&E, a third person comes. Now, this guy did something that the other previous not do. To understand what he did, I need to explain something. The ground under the sanctuary is not flat. It is an incline. And at one end, there is almost 6 or 7 feet between one end of the ground and the floor of the sanctuary. So we use that space to store old furniture. And there's a little door that goes there. So when we were building that door, somebody said, you know, we have this old door which is still in good condition. The only problem, it has a hole because the lock is out. I said, who cares? Let's put this old, we are trying to save every penny. Who cares whether there is a hole? And it's going to be underneath this. Nobody's going to see it, if there's a hole or not. Well, little did we know. That hole saved the day. I'll tell you why. The third guy who came, the PG&E guy, took his instrument, I call it his dagger counter, put it through the hole of the door, and guess what? It registered an extremely high amount of gas underneath the whole sanctuary. Wow. And all it needed was one spark, and the whole building would blow up. Can you imagine that? One spark, and the building would blow up. Ooh, it was so scary. But the good Lord was really, it did not happen. When we checked what the cause of was when they were building the social hall, the contractor was a good guy. He needed a gas line pipe, 3 inches, brought from underneath the gas line system of the sanctuary. So where the pipe had been connected under this sanctuary was leaking. So that was the cause of the leak. I mean, it really is scary. Can you imagine that if nothing happened?
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it's terrible. It did happen. Like, then there was another thing, which was not, it was serious, but not as serious as this. The building code in San Francisco requires that if you have a flat roof, you need to have 2 things. You need to have a drain, obviously. The rain has to go someplace. And then you need to have what they call an overflow pipe, which is usually an ordinary pipe placed 2 inches above the roof. So if for whatever reason the drain is blocked, the water that accumulates will go through the overflow pipe outside. Okay. Actually, if you go to the yard of the next door church and look at the building, you'll see 4 or 5 overflow pipes on the building. And there's an overflow pipe on the kitchen area, but it's totally different. Well, it had rained very heavily for several days, and on Sunday, the rain had stopped. So I came to church. Normally, I don't park near the kitchen. But for whatever reason, that morning, I parked next to the kitchen. I looked up. What do I see? Water is coming like a fountain from the overflow pipe of the kitchen. Oh, I said, the drain is probably plugged. So when we checked, the drain was not plugged. What had happened, there was a pipe coming from the drain to the sidewalk, and that pipe had to be connected to the sewer 3 or 4 feet away. They had not connected it, and they had poured the concrete on the sidewalk, so there was no place for the water to go. So we had to break the sidewalk and make the connection.
Wow.
So it worked out. So those are the 2 problems that we had.
So we have 5 more minutes.
Okay, I would say. Okay,
I have a question.
Sure.
When we joined this church, I remember on the letterhead there was a verse. Was it Amen Panikaroeng?
All things are possible. With God, all things are possible.
With God, all things are possible.
Yes.
So how did that become the motto of this church? How did it become a motto?
I cannot.
Leah, okay. Armenian has the answer, okay. Sorry for
Let me finish. I just have a few
Okay,
more.
go ahead.
Yeah, let me finish.
Go ahead,
I'll take all the questions.
Sorry for interrupting.
That's important. So the next thing is, how did we retire? The next thing we did, how did we retire the mortgage? We had 200,000 waiting. So, I can buy trucks, buy so tough to me. Okay. John and Agnes Halajan who had no children and were active members of the congregation, both the old and the new one, and they had bequeathed $4,500 upon their death. John had died in 1989, and Agnes died in 1996. So all of a sudden, we had this $4,500 coming from their thing. But their instruction, it has only been used for repairs of the church. Well, it's a new church, we don't need repairs. We had this huge debt, we had $60,000 left on the money that we got from the AMAA. So I had a special congregational meeting, and I made a suggestion. I said, okay, let's retire our debt and pay $60,000 to the Armenian Missionary Association, and then set aside $90,000 for repairs, and that gives us $300,000. And we will make an endowment fund in John and Agnes Halajan name, and that will start. So the congregation accepted, we voted, and that was the first endowment fund. The endowment fund now is over $1 million and a half, or $1.1 million or something. If we have an endowment fund in the amount of $5 million at 5% annual interest, which is a conservative interest, we can guarantee the financial future of the church. You don't need any more money. That endowment fund will take care of it. So that's very important. I would suggest, if you have a loved one who was a member of the church, or particularly of the building, think of making an endowment fund. It takes only $1,000 to do, and then you cannot do anything. We had the tragedy of losing our son John 5 years ago. Close to $700 came on his funeral service. I made that money endowment fund. I added $1,000, and ever since then I've been adding $1,000 every year. I want to do that until I die, until I can. I think the future depends on the endowment fund. It's terribly important. Then I did something. It takes only a minute or two.
That's right.
I went online to see what other churches were doing. I saw that most American churches have endowment fund, but they also have bylaws for endowment fund. Well, we didn't have bylaws, so I said maybe a bigger Armenian evangelical church. So I called the Pilgrim Congregational Church in Fresno. Yeah, they have endowment fund, but they have no bylaws. I called the First Presbyterian to say. I called United in Los Angeles. No, they didn't. But the woman says, if you make a bylaw, send us a copy. I couldn't show that to nobody. So, and then there was the late Bob Damir, who was really a good man and a good Christian and a good lawyer. I asked Bob, can you check the law? Is bylaws required for endowment fund? He checked, said, yes, you need to have bylaws. And not only that, the state sets a limit. You cannot take more than 7% of your fund annually from endowment funds. So I told Bob, can you make some bylaws for this and make that 7%, 6%, so we have more, so that we can reach the 5 million closer to this. So Bob made bylaws. He's no longer with us. That was approved by the congregation. So we're the only church, Armenian Congregational, who has bylaws. Nobody else, at least at that time, didn't have it. Maybe some of them have it now. So we have a bylaws for endowment fund. I think I'll stop and you can ask questions. You can ask questions.
Okay, questions? It's open for questions.
Well, your question.
No, he says he doesn't know about that.
Hmm? You had a question, Ravi?
No, Margie knows about it.
Oh,
the,
okay.
the verse I was
I
asking.
have a question.
Oh, yes.
How were
I
you-
forgot how we
She has a question for you.
Yes.
How were you able to balance work, family life,
Bravo.
your career, and your service
Well,
to God?
Very good question.
That's the $64 question. You know, when you have a will, there's a way. As busy I was, day and night I was on call. Can you imagine that? I used to go, I don't know how often, after midnight. I've gone from Hillsborough to the French hospital in San Francisco, sometimes to Seton Medical Center to see patients after midnight, at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. You do it. When you're confronted with this thing, I don't have the exact answer how you do it, but you do it.
A good woman behind us.
What about your beautiful wife, Grandpa?
Because you had a good woman behind you. That's the concept.
Of course. You mean I couldn't have done without her. She was a full support. She
Yes.
agreed with me with everything.
Thank you, Armini.
I was lucky to have that.
Whatever we did, God used us. God used him and everybody else. Margie was extremely active also in the committee.
Bravo, Margie.
But I think
Something about the committee
Well,
in
I
general.
want to say one of the things.
Margie is
Can
going to
I
share
say
something.
something about the committee you put together?
I'm sorry.
Can I say
Sure,
something
go ahead,
about
go
the
ahead.
committee that you put together? Okay, as you know, Doctor was the chair of the committee, but then it was up to him to build these 3 committees, the finance, the publicity, and the construction and design. And he was very intentional about who he asked to be on that committee. For example, in the construction and design committee, I was just the secretary. But George Ishkanyan had a plumbing and hardware business in Cairo. He was the manager of a big hardware store in San Mateo. Baruch Kerkezian was a professional cabinet maker, okay? Chuck Janigian actually installed restaurant kitchens. He knew a lot about construction. Ed Medzian was in real estate. My brother was in the paint business. Everybody, and of course, Artson Shagoyan, he was an architectural draftsman. Every time we had a meeting, Artson had the blueprints on his lap and he brought them to all the meetings. Everybody had a certain skill that they had to bring to that committee, and it was the same thing with publicity, it was the same thing with finance. There wasn't anybody in any of the committees who could just sit there and pontificate. You had to know something, because we needed those kind of people. And that's really what brought everything forward. And as far as Doctor was concerned, all of the meetings that we had were on Wednesday nights, because that was his only day off.
half day.
And he had to get up at 5 o'clock the next morning because he had to perform heart surgery. So think about that. And the meetings, when people complain about the council meetings maybe being more than an hour, we didn't get out of Doctor's house sometimes until 11:30 or midnight. And except for the wonderful refreshments that Armanet provided every time and kept us awake, everything was structured. There were so many decisions to make. You have no idea how much is involved in building a building until you're on a committee like that. But I really learned a lot, and I really think that the other people on the committee deserve a lot of credit, including Doctor.
Armenian, where there was no DEI. It was all in the committee selection process.
I want to say one other thing. What made me do this, I owe it to my mom. My mom was extremely smart woman. She went to high school in Itam. She had the highest score in the entire high school. They were going to send her to Constantinople for study. Somebody else wanted to send the sister of them, and she came to Kilis, close to Itam, became a teacher. They were him and my father. But I owe everything to my mother, who was true Christian. And he was not only smart, he was extremely wise. My father was not educated, he was smart, but he was very emotional. Yes, no, my mother was not like that. If they had a problem, let's see what the solution is. She would say,
She was untouched, that's what.
and I owe a lot, because maybe many of the things, what made me do it is probably my mother unconsciously or consciously drove me to do what I did, and you know, I can't forget that. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank
That
you.
Ես առաջ անկրենով շատ չի հասկացա, բայց պետք եղածը հասկացա։ Հիմա ես ասմած առաջին անգամ կտեսնամ որ եւ ինձ հիսա որ ծեր անունը Zaven է, դոկտոր Zaven է, ասպես հրաշալի մարդ քիչ կա։ Մեկ բանը մորցավ գամքի դերը եւ ղեկավար։ Գամքի դեր եւ ղեկավար։ Աստարի կասերը ես չեմ սկար որ ասմալ աստարի փուլ։ Ասի երդասարտի գամք ունի եւ մեկ ժամ խոսեցավ անդադար։ Ինչ միտք եք ով դասված բահե քեզի։
Amen. Thank you.
I feel, you know, I think I told you at the beginning, you know, I am one of the few members from the committee that is left. You know, some other people have all passed away, and I hope that we have this information stored in the history of the church,
Yes.
because that's very important to know.
Thank you. If you have questions, you can come and ask
You know,
Doctor.
I said this to other people. I am 98 years old. I am legally blind. I am very hard of hearing. I have hearing at 4 times per hour. I have a disc problem in low back. It's painful. I have to walk. But I still come to church. And I don't understand what's being said on the pulpit all the time. But when they sing hymns with which I grew up, it brings me an uplifting.
Amen.
It remembers my old. And then I come to the social hall, and I see people congregating, getting coffee, kids running, playing ball. I feel very good. I said, it's good that we make the social as big as it is.
Yes.
It is. At the time, you know, people were not in favor. So those two things make me feel good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Uncle Zaven. Thank you.
Yeah, if you come close. I think they got it. I got it.